Hey, what's going on, everybody? Bauer Brown here. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Here we are again inside of the tutorial series map because we are going to be going over the traffic system today. We don't have too many videos left in this tutorial series. We are going to be wrapping it up very shortly, so whether we do the train, maybe we'll do the PDA, we'll get the PDA out of the way. If I can think of anything else, we'll throw that in there. And if you guys can think of anything else basic that needs to go into the tutorial series, we'll get that taken care of. But like I said, the tutorial series was all meant to be just very basic, just to get your feet wet, kind of an introduction to map making, okay? Because just because the series is going to be done doesn't mean the videos are going to be done. All right, we're going to take a much deeper dive into certain things like the spline street constructor, and just a bunch of other things that we're going to get into in more depth than what we did in the tutorial series. Okay, so don't stress it if we haven't gotten to anything that you wanted to learn. We will definitely get there. So you can see I did a little bit of work on my maps since the last time we were in here, just a little bit. I got a little bit crazy here with the gravel dirt. I'm gonna have to redo that one because not really feeling that one. But anyhow, like I said, I don't know, got a wild hair up my and decided to do a little bit while I was prepping for this video. But anyhow, enough of that. Let's jump into this. We are gonna do the traffic system, like I said. Did I say that? Well, if I didn't, we're going to do the traffic system, okay? Alrighty, so now the traffic system, I'm gonna take this from square one because, like I said, this is a tutorial series, so I'm assuming some people watching this don't really know much about it. Alrighty, so when you're playing your favorite map and you see these cars zipping around, and these are the AI vehicles, not any of your vehicles. When you see them zipping around and not stopping at stop signs and getting in your way when you're trying to get something done, all right? The way those vehicles move around is they follow a series of splines. It's kind of a grid network of splines, all right? And we, as map creators, we're the guys that put those splines in there, all righty? So we set up the system for them to follow. Now, if you're kind of lost right now and you don't have any idea what I'm talking about as far as splines go, you may want to go back to one of my older videos or my previous videos. I have one just on splines, and you want to get yourself familiar with splines, okay? So now when I did the video where we were creating our blank map, when we very first started getting into this, there were some things that in the scene graph that I told you to go ahead and keep. Some things you didn't want to delete because we're going to reuse them, right? And one of them was the splines folder, and the transform group, and within that transform group was another transform group called traffic system. Alrighty, and I probably had you keep at least one spline in there because there was some barrier or some attributes that we needed off of that. Now, somewhere along the way, I don't know, I deleted mine. I'm even missing some attributes here, so I'm going to get that filled in. If you don't have the transform group here that says traffic system, go over to the base map or one of the base game maps and export it and then re-import it into your map. Or you can do what I'm about to do here. Make sure that you have a transform group labeled traffic system, and it's the capitalization is important. So that's a lowercase t, uppercase s, and traffic system. Now, have your user attributes panel open, and while you have traffic system highlighted, I'm going to go down to my attributes here, and I'm going to name one of them. I'm going to make an on create, right? So I'm going to call that on create, lowercase o, uppercase c, and the type is going to be a string callback or a script callback. I'm sorry. So I'm going to click add there. And the next one is going to be called XML file name, I believe, or XML file, I think is what it is. Alrighty. And the type on that one is going to be string. So we're going to add that. All right, now where it says on create, we're going to go back up to that box we just created, and this one is going to be called traffic system. That's an uppercase T, uppercase S, and that's dot on create, lowercase o, uppercase C. And then for the XML file, what you need to do is you need to go back to your mobmat folder, okay, and you need to see where your traffic system is located. Now, mine is usually in map, but I'm not seeing it here anywhere, okay? So what I need to do is go over to the base game folder. All right, you should know where that's at by now. So get over there, find the map that you're currently working with, or any one of them really. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So go into one of the maps and scroll down till you see traffic system. Okay, and you want to copy that over to our map. Alrighty, you can open it up if you want, have a quick look at it. Alrighty, not much in there. This is basically all that's in here is the vehicles that are going to be driving on your road system. Okay, so that's pretty much all that's in there. Nothing, you're not really missing much. Alrighty, but we do need to refer to this folder or to this file. Okay, so let's get back into our editor here, and mine is at map / I think it's just traffic system .xml. All right, nothing fancy. So that's just the file path. That's it. You're typing in the file path that points towards this traffic system .xml. Alrighty, so it's important you know where you have that. Okay. Alrighty, so once we have that all set up, I'm ready to go there. You can see I had you probably save one of the splines. What I have is I usually keep one spline called blank. Okay, and that's what I have here because I'm going to keep reusing this spline over and over. Alrighty, so I'm going to give it some attributes here. So all I did to this point is just created a small spline, named it blank, and I'm going to give it an attribute. And the first one is going to be called max speed scale. Alrighty, and that one is going to be type integer. Okay, we're going to click add. And the next one is going to be speed limit. Okay, and that's also going to be an integer. And we're going to click add. All right, now I might need to refer back to the base map. Max speed scale, I'm sorry. That's usually set at 1. I don't usually mess with that because 1 seems to work pretty well for me. I've had no need to go up or down. I've played with it here or there, but I don't think I've come up with anything like really definitive. Now the speed limit goes as high as like 150. Now this isn't really like kilometers per hour or anything. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Not really sure. To tell you the truth, doesn't seem like it because when you put it in, you're looking at it in a game, it doesn't really look like it's going that fast. But anyhow, so 150 is usually a number that you'd more see like towards the highways and stuff like that. And then like say, I'm just going to throw some random numbers in there now. Let's say just 80 for a regular street. And you can slow it down a little bit, depending on where these splines are located. Okay. So like I said, if it's a highway, you go up to like 150 or higher, 180. If it's a street, you get the idea. So you can, adjust that speed limit accordingly, depending on where these vehicles are driving at. Now, at some point I'll go over and I'll check the base game and I'll get the values that belong in there. So I have a rough idea what I'm working with. But for right now, you get the idea what's going on there. All right. So this blank, I'm going to keep using over and over. All righty. So we got that settled. Now, in this traffic system transform group, as you're working, you see that we have this transform group here called park cars. Okay. And that's exactly what it says it is. It's all the vehicles that you see randomly parked throughout the map. Okay. You don't have to know exactly which vehicle is getting placed where. The game will take care of that for you. So it'll select them randomly. It'll just randomly select vehicles and it'll park them for you. You just have to tell it where you want it parked. But regarding this transform group for park cars, that always has to be the very last thing in this traffic system folder. It has to be way down on the bottom. You can't have anything below park cars. It has to be on the bottom. If it's not going to work right. Okay, you won't see your park cars and it's going to be a nightmare for you and you're not going to know why. Alrighty, so let's get this started. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is we're going to lay down a spline. So I'm going to take this blank. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to move this back up top here, and I am going to put it in a group. Okay, so I'm going to make a group there. Now, the reason I'm doing the groups is I'm trying to separate everything. All right, so I'm keeping my streets in one group. I'm keeping like left turns in one group, right turns in another group. Maybe like another one that I call gap, and that shoots across intersections. I'll explain all this, but I keep it in groups because as we go, if you look at this blank here, now let me rename this one the streets, okay? And then this blank, I'm going to name it S1 because that's going to be the first spline that I have on my street. Now, when you test this, okay, and let me tell you, like, all the way up to this very day, I have yet to have a single traffic system that I didn't have some issue with. You know, maybe not many, but something. There's always something. It's either a dead end, you name it. So what it does is when it throws that error, and you'll know right away because your traffic system won't work. You won't see any AI vehicles driving around. And when you check your error log, it'll tell you like S1, S2, S3. It'll tell you where the problem is. So it's important that you give these all unique names, okay? And the reason I put them in folders is as you go on, you know, the bigger your map, the bigger your traffic system, the more splines you have in here. And you're going to find out really quickly that you're going to have a buttload of splines in here when you're done. All right. So keeping them all in one folder is doable, but you know, having to keep track of, let's say, S1, S2, and then everything's jumbled up because you have some turns thrown in there. You have a bunch of different things. So you don't really know where you left off. It's much easier to just, trust me, just to keep everything organized into folders. Now, with that being said, once I publish the map, I take everything back out of those folders and I just leave all the splines by themselves in the traffic system transform group. I keep saying folders, but I mean transform group, okay? All right, and the reason I take them back out and I don't leave them in a separate transform group is because if you use auto drive, right, when you very first start a map and it says, hey, do you want to use the current traffic system, you know, to generate an auto drive network? And you say yes, what I noticed is that it takes the very last transform group that you have and it only uses those for your traffic system, right? For your auto drive network. Okay. But if you take them all out, it'll utilize every one of those splines. All right. It took me a minute to figure that one out, but that was definitely an issue. Okay. So now I have my first street. The other thing to remember about this is about the splines is when you test, okay, you have to have everything hidden inside this transform group, or this traffic system transform group. Okay. Now, if they're in like separate transform groups, like separate, I'm going to say folders, but in separate folders here, you can just hide the entire folder. That's no big deal. If you don't, when you test it in game, the splines will show up. They'll be visible. You'll be able to see those as you're testing it, right? And you don't want your players to see that. So always make sure that you hide them when you're done. All right. Now I'm going to go back here a little bit further and I'm going to set down this first spline. Okay. I'm going to set that right in here. Now, the number one rule, my number one rule for splines, if you didn't catch this on my spline video, is to never rotate the spline. All right. So the way I'm going to get this one going is I'm going to go up to Control B and I'm going to set that where I want it. Well, I don't have a midpoint here, but normally there's a midpoint. There's a control vertex in the middle of this. And basically what I would do is just delete the starting point, right? But anyhow, you get the idea. So I'm just moving around my endpoint to get it lined up where I want it. I'm not actually rotating the spline. If you rotate the spline, you're going to have issues. Trust me on that one. All right. So now you got to keep in mind that there's going to be a vehicle traveling along this road. Okay. So you don't want to get it too close to the shoulder or too close to the middle. Okay. So if you can picture dividing that in half, and then divide it in half again, and that's probably where you want your spline to go. Okay, so when the vehicles follow along, right, it's almost like magnetic, like they're stuck to the spline here, okay? So if your spline, if you're not following the contours of the ground close enough, okay, and say it goes up in air like this, or you have any like hoop-de-hoos or humps in it or anything like that, the vehicle is going to follow that, you know, so you'll see the vehicle going up and down and leaving the road surface, and it's not a good look. So you really don't want to go for that. Okay. All right. Now, as far as the spline goes and the vehicles following that spline, the vehicles move from start to end, from S to E. That's the way they move. All right. So if you're in the US or in any traffic, you know, any countries where the traffic drives on the right side of the road, And right, I mean opposite of left, not not the correct side, because there really is no correct side. Depends where you're at. But anyhow, they go from start to end. Okay, so if I was in the UK, I would actually, I would reverse that, and that's the way they would be driving. Okay, but for now, we're in the US, so we're going to go from start to end is the way this is going to go. Alrighty, now this whole thing needs to be a closed system. Okay, and what I mean by closed system. Let me see. How can I explain this? What do I have picked here? Animal mud. Let me pick something smaller like concrete. All right. So imagine that this is a spline network. Okay. This is my traffic system. All righty. Now this here would not be a closed system because I have a gap in my spline. All right. So my ends need to overlap. That would make it a closed system. Okay. So now if I have some miscellaneous streets that kind of go off over here, that's also not a closed system. Okay, that needs to come back and that needs to connect back to your main system somehow. Do you get what I'm talking about? There's no gaps. And what that gap is what they call a dead end. All right, you're going to get a dead end there. So everything has to be connected. All right, so keep that in mind as you're working on this. And I'll show you how I go about it so you're able to test it without it throwing an error. Alrighty, so let me get out of there. So like I said, this all has to be a closed system. Okay. So now basically you're just going to start laying down this spline. Now put down a control vertex by hitting insert. All right. And then we're just going to keep doing control B. Now you want to keep these close together. If your map is not completely flat and you have a lot of elevation changes, keep these control vertex, the control vertex is closer together. And you can see as I stretch this out, how it starts to disappear. That's because there's an elevation change in there, right? And I'm going through some kind of hump or, you know what I mean? An elevation change in a map. Boy, that does not look too good, does it? You want to try the best that you can to keep that fairly straight. All right. If you don't, what'll happen is, you'll just be able to, the car, like I said, the car is going to follow that. So you'll be able to see it. Like if you're driving behind that car, you'll be able to see that car like zigzagging all over the road and, it won't look so great. Alrighty. So that doesn't really look that great, but for the purpose of this tutorial, it'll be just fine. Okay. So now what I do is I normally stop before I get to an intersection. I don't go completely through the intersection. I stop, right? And I'm going to create another spline. All right. And I'll pick that up on the other side. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this blank and we're going to make a copy of that one, put it in streets. Okay. We're going to call that S2. All right. Now, if these guys are working with this blank, if you go to test it, you have to take this blank out of the traffic system folder, or it's going to treat that like a dead end because it's not actually part of your traffic system. Alrighty, so I'm going to start this from the other side here, okay? And I'm going to keep it, I try to keep it the same distance from my intersection, and you're gonna realize why in a minute here, okay? And so the same thing for this. We can just start with Control B and just start laying this down, hitting into. Oops, that did not work out the way I wanted it to. Using Control B. What is going on? There we go. Okay, and like I said, just using insert and kind of laying things down. And you just kind of try to keep the same distance from that right side there. You see that right shoulder, that gravel dirt? You're going to have to keep it somewhat uniform. Alrighty, so now you're probably asking yourself, why in the world did you leave that gap there? It doesn't make any sense. All right, well, I'm going to explain that to you in a minute also. But for now, I'm going to copy this blank one more time, and I'm going to put that in the streets. And we're going to name that S3. And we're going to do this one more time up here. Okay, and like I said, I don't rotate. So what I do is I just take that E and I manually move it wherever I want it, like so. And remember that your arrow keys, your left and right arrow keys, will move you along the vertexes of the spline. Now I don't have enough vertexes here. I can go up here and show you which direction goes where. All right, so on this one, if you go right, that goes from start to end. The left arrow key goes from end to start. The up arrow key it takes you directly to start. The bottom, the bottom, I can't talk tonight. The bottom. Oh, yeah. Let me do that one more time. Okay, so the right arrow key is taking you from start to end, right? So you can scroll through from start to end. The left arrow key, oops, and that's what I was doing here, is going through. And the left arrow key takes you from end to start. Okay, looks like that. If you hit the up arrow key, that takes you directly to start. The down arrow key takes you directly to end. Okay, so let me get back to my spline that I was over at before. And that's going to come in handy. You're going to realize as you're doing this, that's going to come in handy, especially around intersections. All right, so I'm going to start placing this spline. Okay, always stopping at the intersection. Now, if these guys decide somewhere along the line, like, it's too much work, I'm not going to do a traffic system, I don't want cars. Well, if you plan on releasing your map or utilizing the AI system, you do want a traffic system. Whether you use it or not, and have your traffic turned on is a whole nother story. But your AI does use this road network, this traffic system to move around, okay? So it's important that you have it here. Whether you use it or not, doesn't matter. This is going to be their first priority. Your AI prioritizes, how they move around, and they're definitely going to choose, this spline network over anything else. Okay. So you want to have it there so the AI can utilize it. Now, the reason that I left these ends here, all right, is because as the AI is moving along here, he's going to have the option. When he gets to this end point here, he's going to have the option if he wants to turn left, he wants to turn right, or if this was a four-way intersection, he can go straight. Okay. And he'll decide that on his own. You're not coding that into the spline or anything. He'll decide, what he wants to do when he gets there, or she. Okay. Don't roast me, or she. It could be she. All right. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to duplicate this blank one more time. So we're going to duplicate that. Like I said, I'm going to move that up because you don't want to have that. You want to have it down. I'm going to put it in a group. All right. And this group here, we're going to call like LT. Those are going to be my left turns. Like I said, it seems kind of frivolous right now and pointless to be, dividing up your turns and your streets. But once you start troubleshooting and you need to go back and find one of these splines, it's going to make a huge difference. Not only that, but when you have like 198 left turns and they're all mixed in, like through the, somewhere just mixed in there, just trust me on this one. You're going to be glad that you organize these. Okay. So now I'm going to take this left turn and we're going to call it, let's see, LT1 or L1 would be fine. Okay. Now we're going to take the start, Control B, and as you hover over top or even get close to the end point of that S3 there, it should snap right over it. Okay. And then I'm going to take the E and I'm going to do the same thing up here, right? It snaps right over it. I'm going to hit insert because I don't have an extra spline point there. So let me do that again. Let's take, this is where the left and right arrow keys come in handy, right? So I'm just going to hit left and I'm going to move this spline point right there, this control vertex. I'm going to move it up in here somewhere. Okay. And then I hit the down arrow key, got myself over the end, and I'm going to snap that again because I needed to put an extra vertex in here, okay? And I'm just going to lift that up just a little bit because it's buried under the ground. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to do is just kind of move this around however you want him to make that turn, okay? If you want him to turn wider, short, wider, or like a more narrow turn, or, depends how you want him to turn. So when it looks good, you want to stop right there, okay? You want to leave that. Now make sure that your points snapped over top of each other, okay? Because that's very important. If they're not, if these are off by any way, like, if you can see this end point here, even if it's just a hair, just like that, It's not going to work. It's going to leave you with a dead end. So these have to be over top of each other. Now don't try to line them up. Use Control B and let it snap itself over there. All right. And in this way, you're guaranteed that they're lined up, that they're directly right over top of each other. Okay. Now you can have more than one spline that lines up on this endpoint here, right? So I can start another one that goes this way and makes the right turn. And I can put even a third one here that goes straight. All right, if you needed to go straight. All righty, so now as for this gap right here, all right, I would create yet one more transform group. So let's take this blank. We're going to duplicate it again. Okay. And this blank we are going to put in a group. And this one I just name like gap or something like that, right? It doesn't matter, just as long as you know what it is and you can keep track of it. All right, so the gap I'll name G1. Okay, same thing as we're going to go over here. The start needs to go right there. This is why I always try to keep it the same distance, because as you start to get a lot of control vertexes filling up this area, you're kind of unsure which one is the start and which one is the end at that point. But if you usually keep it at the same distance, you have a pretty good idea of what's what. Now to double check that, just go back to your previous spline. All right, so my end and start was good there. And this one was also good. Okay, so that was my turn. Go back to the gap and we're good. All righty, so what we did here is we gave him the option, because normally there would be a left turn here, right? So he could choose to go left if he wants to, or he can keep going straight across that gap. And then he just picks up the next spline and then he keeps going. All righty. So these guys want to do this for the entire road network. All right. And it's tedious. It takes a little bit of time. Now, when you get in the spline street constructor, it gets way easier because there's an option to have it create those splines for you, and it puts them exactly in the right area. So all you need to do is tie in the intersections and the turns and stuff like that. And that is it. The rest of it's done for you. So spline tree constructor, it's there's some haters, people that, there's better ways to do it. I won't say better, but if you can do your own roads in Blender and stuff, that's preferable. You can customize your roads any way you want. That's pretty nice, right? But spline street constructor is definitely worth its weight, man. There's no doubt about it. It speeds up the process, gives you a pretty decent looking road, and it's not hard to use. It's really not. It takes a little bit there's a learning curve. The more you use it, the better you get, but it's definitely worth having. Okay. So now what I normally do here is, now you can see that I only made a left turn here. And I normally wouldn't even have this spline here. You can see where my mouse is. I normally wouldn't even have that there, because if I ever wanted to test it, I have to close this loop before I'm able to test it. So normally I'll make the left turn and I'll kind of keep going, unless you don't plan on testing right away. Then you can just start making all your turns at once. You can put in a right turn. You can start working on the other side of the street, but this does need to be closed before you're able to test it. So generally I'll just do one at a time. I'll go through and I'll just start laying down like what you see here. I'll go down this whole right side of the street. All right, keep hitting, insert as we go. Those jumps were a little bit big there. That could cause a problem, but you need to go literally all the way around. Now I might get up to this intersection here. I'll bang another left, and then I'll come all the way up in here, and I'll put the gap there, right? I'll stop right here, and then I'll make a gap and pick up the spline on the other side, but I won't put in my right turn because that would be a dead end if I want to test it. And then come all the way around this way. Alrighty, when you get to the bridge, you can run your spline right over the bridge. That's not a big deal. All right, so let me let's duplicate our blank here, and I'll show you how that's done. All right, and this can probably get moved in the streets. And if you want, you can call it like B1 for bridge 1, or it's probably going to be part of the street, so it really wouldn't matter. So I'll name that one S4. Okay, and we'll put that down here. Now the endpoint needs to go over here like so. All right, now this is a downhill, so it's pretty important that you keep this, that your jumps aren't too big there, right? So you're staying pretty close on your control vertexes. Now, this is the default way of doing it, okay? Now, if you guys got yourself familiar with that spline, the scripting tool from Farmer Boys Modding, that's going to come in extremely handy because you don't need to be as careful when you're laying down these splines. You can just willy-nilly, as long as they're lined up in the right location as far as like the center of the road, you know, you're where you want to be center-wise, you don't have to worry about, you know, having your vertexes super close together, because there is an option in there where you can export that spline basically and then re-import it, and it will hug the contours of the ground perfectly. Now, we're not really doing that right now because what we're doing is just the default. We stick with just the default ways of doing this for now, just so you know what's going on. You know, not everybody has the spline tools, or not everybody, you know, knows how to use them yet, but it's always important to know how to do something the default way, you know, the proper way first. Not that it's improper using the scripting tool, but that you know how to do it without using any tools. So that's what we're doing now. This is the default way of putting your road system in, okay? Alrighty, so there you go. That's all there really is to your bridges. You don't really have to do anything special with it. Just run your spline right across the bridge, okay? And that's not going to goof up anything at all. Now, if you get into an area where, like, say there's like a field or something, like if you can use your imagination and say there's a field somewhere in here. Let me get into like a dirt color or something here. Okay, so imagine that there's a field somewhere in here, all right? Now, if you have like some sort of like dirt path or a roadway or something like that, and you want to cross this water system right here, okay? Like, do you want the AI to actually be able to drive across there? Say your pathway cut across there. Here, you would need what's called an AI spline, okay? And you can see that we have a folder here, or a transform group labeled AI. And that one says under bridge. So we're just going to move that one down here. It didn't move. Okay, it's probably somewhere way over there. Well, that's not really working. All right. Well, there's no attributes to that one, so we don't have to really worry about that. We could actually use the blank. Let's delete that. We can copy the blank into that folder. Okay. And then that will go under your AI folder. Now, the reason for this is this has to do with your AI drive cost and the textures, okay? What did I do there? Hopefully you guys remember that video with the AI drive cost. And if not, you know, go back and check that video as well. And that'll teach you a few things that you need to know. Okay, so this AI spline doesn't have to go and connect back into your regular network. All right, this is a standalone spline. It doesn't matter. There's no dead ends or anything like that. You don't have to worry about that. And what's happening here is, now if you have a pathway, all right, so there should be some type of pathway here. All right, you would guess that there's a pathway. It doesn't have to be one. But what this spline is doing is it's taking the AI from one safe texture with a good AI drive cost of, let's say, like 2, and it's taking him across an area that he wouldn't normally pick. He wouldn't normally choose this path because there's like river mud and water and stuff in there, and that has a much higher drive cost, okay, like 10, 12, 16, somewhere in there. So he wouldn't normally pick that route. He would stay away from it. But giving him this spline is kind of like an imaginary bridge of sorts, right? So this is letting him know that he can follow this spline and he'll be okay to cross that texture that he would not normally choose otherwise. All right, so in that instance, okay, you would need an AI spline. All right. But you would not need one over here on the bridge because the bridge is part of the traffic system. So there's already a spline that goes over top of that bridge. All right. So you really wouldn't need to worry about that. Okay. Now, how I have this laid down here. Okay. So you can see I have this spline just sort of laid down in the middle of nowhere. If I want to tie this in, you don't have to go from start to end. Okay. So you can see this is my start. Normally I would be on the end side of it and I just keep working in that direction. You can work in both directions, right? So I can click insert here and I can just keep on going. So I don't have to. A lot of people for some reason don't realize that they can go the other way. Not sure why, but I've actually seen it where it happened. Guy didn't realize he can go both directions. I don't know. I guess I can see it. You wouldn't think of that sort of thing, right? All right. So just keep in mind what you're doing there with the intersections. All right. Now I'll give you guys one tip, trick, pointer, whatever you want to do, however you want to use this. Okay. This is, like I said, this is, I wouldn't want to say it's a pointer or a trick because you have to use this take it with a grain of salt. Okay. Use at your own risk. Let's put it that way. All right. So you can see with this spline here. All right. So my end point comes all the way up here. Now let's imagine there was a stop sign on this corner. Okay. Now, normally what I would do is not normally, but what you could do is you could end this spline back here, right? And then you would have one more spline in here. And this is your stopping distance for him to come up to the stop sign. All right. Now, the way that I do this, okay, let's make another copy of this blank. I'm going to lay this down. Okay. And this is going to be my stop. And you don't want to give them too big of an area. All right, so that's probably much too big. You probably want much less than that. So as he gets up to the spline, he'll start to stop. All right, now you can't really go down and adjust the speed limit down to 0 or the speed scale. I've tried all that and it doesn't really work. All right, it doesn't work that great. All right, so what did I say was my number one rule for splines? My number one rule was never rotate the spline. Okay, so the way that I get my traffic to stop here is I rotate the spline. Let's give it like say -45. Okay. Now with that rotated, I'm going to come back up to the start. I'm going to put that over top of this point where it goes. And I'm going to take this E, the end point, and I'm going to put that where it goes. All right, so I got a straight spline again. But my rotation, my Y rotation's at -45. So what just happened there? Okay, well, first, like I said, my number one rule is to never rotate that spline, and I just did that. So basically, I just broke my traffic system on purpose. Okay, and what'll happen, and this is something that will happen as you're anywhere in your traffic system. If you rotate a spline, you might be testing it out. And I've had this happen where I'm cruising down the road behind an AI and all of a sudden he jams on the brake, I rear end him, and then we're cursing at each other and it's not good. But that's what the problem was. Somewhere along the line, I must have rotated my spline and not realized it. And it doesn't have to be much of a rotation, right? It could be a very small, insignificant number, but it's enough to mess up your traffic system. As your traffic hits it, it'll just almost come to a dead stop or really slow. They don't really stop, but they go slow enough where they might as well be stopped. All right. So this will have the same effect. Right. So as the traffic comes up to here, he's basically hitting a broken spline. He'll keep moving. He'll move from start to end, but he'll do it very slowly. Right. So that's, if you ever look at any of my maps, you can see like the traffic as they approach the stop sign, they'll slow down significantly and then they'll keep going. That's how I do that. That's how I pull off that effect. All right. That's my little trade secret there. Okay. Now, like I said, you need to take that with a grain of salt because, and I'm going to move this up here. This doesn't need to be that big of a stopping distance. If not, you're going to be behind this guy waiting forever for him to stop. You're going to be like, oh my God, come on. Just want to give it a little bit of room. So like I said, I wouldn't say this is a secret or anything like that. And you need to take it with a grain of salt because it works It definitely works, but I have got mixed results out of it. In some cases, it doesn't always work exactly the way I want it to, but I would say 90 to 95% of the time, it does exactly what I want, and I've been happy with it. That's good enough for me, okay? So what I would do with that spline there, wherever I put that, okay, and where did I put that? I can't find it now. Was that it? No, that's not it. That's it. All right, so that one I would actually rename maybe stop one, STP1, and then that would also go in its own transform group, and I would name them stops. Okay. And then what was this blank here? Not sure what that is. Was that the actual blank? Yeah, that's my actual blank. Oh, that was my AI. And then that one you can name AI1. Alrighty. So everything is organized nice and neat in their little groups there. Okay. And like I said, you can't test this the way it is. These all have to be connected, every one of them. Now, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go over the whole entire traffic system and lay the entire thing out. That's going to be too much. But do you think you got a handle on this? I'm trying to look at this from the perspective of a player that knows nothing about this. Like I said, at this point here, you would create a right turn. You already have the left, and as you go, just make sure, when you're laying this spline down, when you get up to an intersection, you stop. Create another spline that shoots across the gap of that intersection and picks up the spline on the other side, right? So one of the biggest mistakes that guys make is they're laying down, say, this spline here, and they just keep going. They get to the intersection and they just keep on going. All right, well, now you got a problem because there's no end point for him to jump over to a different spline. And that's basically what happens, right? He just leaves one spline and the AI picks up another. So when you're making these roads here, you can't take a spline. Like if you have let's say this gap here, not gap, my blank. Okay, let's duplicate that. And we're going to put this down over here. Let's just pretend there's a road over here. All right. So what you cannot do, even though it'll snap to any one of these control vertexes, you can't just pick up the spline this way. It would be awesome if you could, if you could just make one complete spline that goes straight across the intersection, and then you could just pick up on that spline anywhere you want and deviate from it, with another spline, but you can't. It has to be the end of one spline and then the start of another. Do you understand what I'm saying there? So if you look at what we have here, we have an end point there. So the start point from this spline would need to be right over the end point for that spline. Okay. You can't have one continuous spline and then just, put this one in the middle of that spline. It'll be nice. It'd be gorgeous if you can do that. It really would. The other thing that I would like to see Giants introduce somewhere along the line in the editor is the ability to break a spline, right? So when you have an entire spline here, now you have an open and close feature that'll open a spline, but it won't break it in the middle of it, right? So if you have this here, say if I was here, I would like to be able to click O, right here, and be able to open that spline right there, clicking O, but it doesn't do that, unfortunately. And all I did was I just basically closed that spline. So I would really, that'd be something nice that I would like to see, just the ability to break a spline in the middle. It does have its uses. Trust me, especially when you work with Spline Street Constructor, because that's going to give you one continuous spline all the way through. And if you run a roadway up to it, or any type of path, there's ways to get around it, but you don't have the ability to break that spline and tie something else in. All right. So like I said, always make sure when you get to intersections, you stop one spline, start another to get you across the intersection, and then a third spline once you get across the intersection. I know it seems like a lot, but the more you do it, the more you'll get used to it. My recommendation for you is to go over to one of the base game maps and really study the way that they laid out their splines. Okay, look at the areas where they put their AI splines. Look at the intersections. Look at the way they put the turns in there. Look at the way, look at the speed limits. What speed limit did they use where? They got 150 for the highways. Did they got, What do they have on the side streets? What do they have for dirt roads, stuff like that? Study all that. Don't just take my word for it, because, I don't always explain things the best way. What makes sense in my mind might be confusing the hell out of somebody else. Okay. So like I said, just take this all with a grain of salt and double check. Go into the base game map and look at what they did. The best way to learn anything is to look at somebody else's work. Look at the way they did it. Study the way they did it. What did they do? How did they do it? That's the best way to learn. Okay. Don't steal their ideas and like verbatim and make an exact duplicate of their map. But you know what I mean? Have a look, learn from other people. Okay. So that in a nutshell is our traffic system. Alrighty. So like I said, as it sits now, you can't have any dead ends. And like I said, a dead end, this would be a dead end right here. This spline, because it doesn't connect to anything. The spline here, also a dead end because it doesn't connect to anything. All right. Now, if I came up to this intersection, I made a right, went down this little part of the triangle here, connected to this spline, and this spline went all the way around and connected back to this spline. Now I'm one step closer to being a closed loop. I would have to take this one here, run it down, and tie it in. So basically every one of these splines need to be tied into one another for that to be a closed system, okay? Remember that your AI splines do not need to be tied into the rest of the system. They can be a standalone. The same thing goes for your pedestrians, okay? So when you get to your pedestrian system here, now I have a river path, which I don't even know if I want to try. Oh, it does line up. Now see, that one lines up, right? This must be where the river went before, so it's pretty smart to put that river back there, huh? I'm not going to keep this one here, but for the sake of demonstration, right, here is my pedestrian spline. This doesn't need to be tied in. It doesn't need to be a closed system. It could just be one long spline wherever you want it. Now, it does need to follow the contour of the ground like the traffic system would, because you don't want your pedestrians walking up in midair and stuff like that. That would be kind of weird. But it doesn't need to be tied in. You can put these individual splines anywhere you want, and the pedestrians will utilize this spline as they go. And have a look, because there are some attributes that go along with this one. You have a group name. So if you have a group of splines and you want to group them together, you can give them a group name. The width of the spline, I believe, is how much of a distance they'll utilize as they're walking around, because they will deviate from this spline. And then the density is the amount of people that you want utilizing that spline at any one given time. All right. So if you go up with this number and increase this number, you'll see more people utilizing this spline. But if you keep it lower, you might only ever see a person now and then walking along it. Okay. So if you're in a really crowded area like a city and the hustle and bustle of a city, you might want to increase this density a little bit to have more people, walking along that spline. And like I said, the width is how much of that spline from left to right that they'll utilize. Now you'll notice sometimes you have a slower, like a pedestrian that's walking slower, and then one that's walking faster, and they'll actually overtake one another. You might have one walking in one direction and a pedestrian walking the other direction. And again, they'll deviate from that spline. They'll step off to the right a little bit, and they'll pass around each other. So study them, watch the pedestrians in your maps and see how they work. It's kind of neat. You'll learn a few things. Like I said, that's the way you learn these things. Trust me, I wasn't spoon-fed any of this information. I had to go and find it all for myself. All right. So I'm trying to give you guys as much of a head start as I can. So, you don't have to struggle the way that I did. And in some respects, I still struggle a little bit. There's definitely a lot of things that I still don't know. So I'm still learning just like you guys are, All righty. So I'm going to leave that with that. So I'm really hoping that I didn't confuse anybody with that, and that you have a pretty good idea for the way the spline system works. Okay. The traffic system. And like I said, remember that you do have to go from start to end. That's going to be a big thing. You're going to realize that, at least the way that I do my traffic systems, because I have Spline Street Constructor when I lay down my streets, that it happens a lot that my start and my end points are mixed up. It's just in the wrong direction. And that's the beauty of your shortcuts is just hit R and I can change it that easy. I don't have to lay down an entire new spline. I can just hit R. I can all fixed up. And what'll happen is, say if this was reversed and I was testing it, it would throw multiple errors. Whatever's connected to this would say it has a dead end. Whatever's connected on the other side of it would say it has a dead end. The turn that connects into that spline would say it has a dead end. So you would probably get like 4 different errors just from one spline, going the wrong direction. That's kind of the way that works. And once you realize that, you just fix this one spline, you'll put the start where it belongs, the end where it belongs, and it'll all straighten itself out. Okay, so you can't have an end connect to an end. It always has to be a start connected to an end connected to a start. You get the idea. Alrighty, and then you would just go all the way along your traffic system here, your road system. You put your turns in, and then you could test it out. And it's always nice to test your map and see the traffic driving on your map for the very first time. Alrighty, and I'd like to finish this one just to show you how it goes, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. I have a feeling this is going to be the same map that I utilize for, it's going to be my test map, so I'm going to utilize it for a lot of stuff, probably even for Spline Street Constructor. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do the whole traffic system now, because I'll end up redoing it with the Spline Street Constructor. I just wanted to give you guys a good idea of how to get started on this traffic system. Alrighty, so hopefully I didn't confuse you. The train, we're not really going to get into that one right now. I guess I'll have to slip that one into another video. Alrighty, so like I said, I hope you get it. If you don't, make sure you hit me up in the comments. Ask questions if you need to, and I'll explain them the best I can. If I need to, I'll create an entirely new video. Hopefully I don't need to. Don't forget, if you guys can, leave a like, subscribe, that sort of thing. It really helps me out. And with that being said, I am Bauer Brown, and I will see you on the next one.